What if he doesn't make it anyway? The question came through the phone, light and distant, as if it were being asked out of mild curiosity. Not fear, not grief, just calculation. Evelyn Carter did not respond right away. She stood in the hospital corridor, phone pressed to her ear, eyes fixed on the closed double doors at the end of the hall. Beyond them, her son lay on an operating table with his chest open, machines breathing for him while strangers worked against time. At 72, Evelyn had learned when silence was more powerful than words. This was one of those moments. The surgeon had been clear. If complications worsened, and they already were, the team would need immediate authorization to proceed. Without consent from the legal decision-maker, they would be forced to stop. Stop in this case meant letting nature decide. Nature was rarely kind. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and warm metal. A wall clock ticked above the doors. Each second felt deliberate, almost accusatory. Time was no longer neutral. It was an active threat. Evelyn lowered the phone and looked at the screen. The call was still connected. Somewhere far away, her daughter-in-law stood in another country, surrounded by light and noise, untouched by the sterile stillness of this place. Evelyn spoke at last. Her voice was calm, too calm to be mistaken for weakness. "He's alive right now," she said. "That's the only fact that matters." There was a pause on the line, then a soft sigh, the sound people made when inconvenience entered their day. Evelyn turned slightly as a nurse passed by, shoes squeaking softly against the floor. The nurse avoided eye contact, as if afraid of witnessing something private and irreversible. The surgeon stood a few steps away, arms folded, posture controlled. His eyes kept drifting toward Evelyn's phone. He had seen families freeze at moments like this. He had also seen them choose. "On record, his spouse has priority," he had said earlier. "We need her consent if we're forced to change course." Evelyn had understood immediately. Priority in this building was a legal concept. It had nothing to do with love. She took a breath and asked the question she already suspected the answer to. "Where are you right now?" Another pause. This one longer. "I'm overseas," the woman replied. Her tone was careful, rehearsed. "Paris." The word landed heavily. Evelyn imagined what that meant without needing details. A hotel room high above the street. Glass doors open to a balcony. Music, laughter. A city built to look beautiful from a distance. None of it belonged in this moment. "The doctors need your authorization," Evelyn said. "They may need to act quickly." "I can't just disappear," the woman replied. "I have obligations." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, not in pain, in clarity, obligations. She had spent her career watching people hide intent behind that word. It was always the same. Money, image, opportunity, disguised as responsibility. Evelyn moved toward the window at the end of the hall. Outside, cars passed, lights blurred. The world continued as if nothing fragile was happening inside these walls. "This call can authorize care," Evelyn said. "Nothing else matters." "What if it doesn't change the outcome?" the woman asked again. "What if he doesn't make it anyway?" That was the moment something shifted. Not in the hallway. Not in the operating room. Inside Evelyn. She ended the call. The surgeon looked at her, waiting for an explanation. Evelyn met his eyes. "Give me 1 minute," she said evenly. "I'll get your answer." She returned to the waiting room and sat down. The television played silently. A smiling face advertised something trivial. Evelyn opened a notes app and wrote 4 short lines. Consent. Timeline. Motive. Money. She stared at the last word the longest. This was no longer about uncertainty. It was about choice. Paris did not whisper. The moment the video call connected, sound poured through the phone. Music, laughter, glasses touching. The noise was careless and alive. the kind that came from people who believed nothing important could be taken from them tonight. Evelyn Carter stood still in the hospital corridor, the phone held a few inches away from her ear now. She did not need it closer. Every sound already felt intrusive. On the screen, her daughter-in-law appeared under warm lights, not hospital lights, soft, flattering lights. Behind her stretched a balcony railing, dark iron against the night. Farther back, unmistakable even without focus, the illuminated outline of a tower rose into the sky. Paris presented itself like a postcard, perfectly framed. Claire Beaumont smiled into the camera, not apologetically, not anxiously. The smile was relaxed, practiced, professional. "You can see it, right?" she said, turning the phone slightly so the view filled the screen. "It's incredible here." Evelyn did not comment. She noted details instead. A champagne flute on the table beside Claire, a light jacket draped carelessly over a chair, makeup untouched by stress. Eyes clear, no redness, no swelling, no signs of someone who had been awake worrying. Evelyn spoke evenly. "The doctors need your consent now." Claire waved one hand dismissively, as if brushing away an overreaction. "I understand, but this is complicated." Behind her, someone laughed and called her name. Claire turned her head briefly, smiling wider, then looked back at the screen. "I've already paid for everything," she continued. "Flights, hotel, arrangements. If I leave, I lose a lot." Evelyn shifted her weight slightly. The floor beneath her feet was cold and unforgiving. She welcomed it. It kept her grounded. "Your husband is on an operating table," Evelyn said. "This call can authorize treatment." Claire frowned, not in concern but in calculation. Her eyes moved, quick and precise, like someone running numbers. "Do you know how this looks?" Claire asked. "If I vanish in the middle of a campaign, people talk. Brands notice." Evelyn watched her carefully. The way she stood straight. The way she kept herself centered in the frame. Even now, Claire was managing an image. "People talk when someone dies too," Evelyn replied. Claire's smile thinned. "That's not fair." Nothing about this was fair. Evelyn had long since stopped expecting fairness from reality. "Put yourself somewhere quiet," Evelyn said. "I'm bringing the surgeon on." Claire's expression tightened. "Not yet. I need a minute." "A minute is not available," Evelyn said. Claire exhaled sharply, frustration leaking through the polish. "Evelyn, you're acting like this is simple. There are consequences." Evelyn nodded once. "Yes." Claire leaned closer to the camera, her voice lowered, confidential. "If he survives but never recovers fully, that changes everything. You understand that, don't you?" Evelyn understood far more than Claire realized. She had spent decades reviewing claims where tragedy became leverage. She knew how people positioned themselves early, before outcomes were certain. This conversation was not about grief. It was about positioning. "The doctors are waiting," Evelyn said. "Say yes." Claire looked away from the camera. For a brief moment, Evelyn saw something real flicker across her face. Not fear, not love, risk. "If I say yes," Claire asked, "and it all goes wrong, what happens then?" Evelyn answered without hesitation. "Then you chose life." Claire laughed softly. "Life isn't that simple." "No," Evelyn replied. "Money is." The words hung between them. Claire straightened, the smile returning, sharper this time. "I need to think." Evelyn watched the Eiffel Tower glow behind her, steady and indifferent. "Thinking is a luxury," Evelyn said. "My son doesn't have it." Claire hesitated. The background noise swelled again, voices pulling her attention away. "I'll call you back," Claire said. Evelyn did not argue. She did not plead. She ended the call. The hospital corridor felt quieter after the screen went dark. The contrast was almost violent. Evelyn turned and walked back toward the operating doors. The surgeon was still there, waiting. "She's choosing," Evelyn said simply. The surgeon's jaw tightened. He nodded once. Evelyn looked down at her phone again. The image of Paris had vanished, but the calculation behind it remained. For the first time that night, Evelyn allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. This was no longer a delay. It was intent. Evelyn Carter had not cried yet. Not in the corridor. Not during the call. Not when the doors to the operating wing stayed closed longer than expected. Tears belong to moments when there was nothing left to do. This moment still had structure. She walked to the small hospital cafe and sat at a corner table where no one lingered. The coffee tasted burnt. She drank it anyway. Routine steadied her hands. From her bag, she took out a thin folder. Nothing dramatic. No red tabs or warning labels. Just paper. Clean. Ordinary. The kind people trusted too easily. Insurance. She laid the pages out one by one. There it was. The policy Daniel had taken out 3 years earlier. High coverage. Immediate payout clause. Minimal contest window. A design meant for speed, not scrutiny. Evelyn scanned the beneficiary line. One name. His wife. No contingencies. No shared designation. No medical delay riders that favored recovery. If Daniel survived, payments slowed to a crawl. Rehabilitation caps. Coverage disputes. Time. If he died, everything moved fast. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, not in shock, in focus. She followed the next section. Emergency procedures, treatment delays, clauses that activated if decision-making authority was unreachable. Legal gray zones where minutes became leverage. Claire's silence had not been random. It fit. Evelyn leaned back and let the noise of the cafe wash over her. Cups clinking, a low television murmur, life proceeding without meaning. She had reviewed thousands of cases like this in her career. Accidents that weren't quite accidents. Timing that always seemed unfortunate for one person and profitable for another. The pattern never changed, only the faces did. Her phone buzzed. A message preview lit the screen. "Sorry, it's chaotic here. I'll call later." Evelyn did not open it. She turned to the transaction summary next. Premium payments routed through a joint account, but the funding source had shifted months ago. Smaller transfers. Different timing. Someone had been preparing for cash flow changes. She noted it. Preparation was not proof, but it was direction. Evelyn closed the folder and sat still. The weight in her chest was no longer fear. It was alignment. Every piece now pointed the same way. This was not a marriage built to last hardship. It was a contract designed to end cleanly. She stood and returned the folder to her bag. As she walked back toward the operating wing, she passed a family huddled together, whispering prayers. Another woman paced with a phone pressed to her ear, voice shaking. Evelyn felt separate from them. Not superior, just elsewhere. She reached the doors and stopped. Behind them, surgeons worked without knowing the numbers Evelyn now knew. They fought for life while someone else weighed outcomes. Evelyn took out her phone and opened a fresh note. She wrote one sentence. Delay benefits only one party. She locked the screen. This was no longer about getting consent. It was about documenting intent. And intent, once proven, changed everything. The room with Evelyn Carter did not cry. Not when the surgeon finally came out with his mask pulled low and his eyes still tense. Not when she heard that Daniel was alive, but not safe, stable, but fragile. The kind of word that meant nothing could be taken for granted. She listened. She nodded. She asked precise questions. No emotion leaked into her voice. When the surgeon finished, Evelyn thanked him and stepped away. Gratitude, like everything else, was best delivered cleanly. She returned to the waiting area and chose a seat with a clear view of the hallway. From here, she could watch movement without being noticed. Old habits returned easily. Evelyn opened her bag again. This time, she took out nothing official, just her phone. She began where she always began: accounts. Daniel's finances were simple, predictable income, few risks. He had never enjoyed money. He used it, saved it, ignored it. His wife, on the other hand, treated money like proof of existence. Evelyn accessed the records she was still legally allowed to see: joint accounts, linked cards, overseas charges. Paris appeared everywhere: hotels, dining, transportation, charges made while Daniel lay unconscious. None of it hidden. Claire had never believed she needed to hide. Evelyn moved on. Contracts, brand agreements routed through personal accounts, short-term campaigns, high visibility, payment schedules timed carefully around travel. If the trip ended early, penalties applied. If it continued uninterrupted, bonuses triggered. Evelyn understood immediately. The delay was profitable. She noted the pattern. No screenshots yet, no reports. Not until everything was complete. Rushing created gaps. Gaps were where people escaped. Across the room, a television murmured. Someone laughed in a game show audience. Evelyn felt no irritation. Emotional noise no longer reached her. Her phone vibrated. Another message. "I can't talk right now. This is stressful for me too." Evelyn read it once, then archived it. Stress. The word was being misused. She locked her phone and rested her hands on her knees. They were steady. That told her everything she needed to know. Some mothers collapsed when their children were hurt. Others screamed. Evelyn prepared. She reviewed the insurance structure again in her mind. Immediate payout. Sole beneficiary. A window where contesting would be difficult unless intent could be demonstrated. Intent required behavior. Behavior required time. Claire was providing both. Evelyn allowed the trip to continue. She would not interrupt it. She would not warn anyone. The safest people were always the most careless. From her seat, she could hear the rhythmic beeping of machines from beyond the doors. It was distant, muffled, but constant. Alive, for now. Evelyn stood and walked to the vending machine. She bought a bottle of water and drank it slowly. Hydration mattered. Fatigue led to mistakes. She returned to her seat and opened a new note. She wrote a single sentence. Let her feel secure. This was no longer about confrontation. It was about timing. Paris kept celebrating. Evelyn Carter watched it happen through a small screen in a quiet hospital corner. She did not scroll quickly. She took her time. Speed missed details. Photos appeared first. Champagne flutes held at the perfect angle. A city glowing behind a smiling face. Captions written in careful optimism. Words about gratitude, opportunity, living in the moment. Evelyn noted the timing. Each post went live while Daniel remained sedated. Each caption avoided specifics. No mention of hospitals. No mention of fear. The story being told was clean and uninterrupted. Evelyn saved everything. She did not react. No likes, no comments. Silence was better than attention. Across the ward, a nurse adjusted a curtain. Somewhere, a monitor beeped steadily. Life here moved in measured rhythms. Paris, on the other hand, moved fast. More posts followed. A rooftop dinner, soft lights, a group shot with unfamiliar faces. The kind of image that suggested importance without explaining why. Evelyn recognized the technique. Appear central, appear wanted. Her phone vibrated. I'm trying to stay positive. Evelyn archived the message. Positive was not a feeling. It was branding. She opened the activity log again. Charges continued to post. Meals, transportation, a dress purchased hours before a scheduled appearance. The spending was not reckless. It was intentional. Each expense reinforced the narrative of normalcy. Normal things did not attract scrutiny. Evelyn leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment. She listened to the sounds of the hospital, shoes on tile, low voices, a cart rolling past. These were honest sounds. They did not pretend to be anything else. When she opened her eyes, her decision was complete. She would not interrupt the celebration. People revealed themselves best when they felt safe, when they believed the worst had already been avoided or was someone else's problem. Evelyn allowed the trip to continue. She allowed the posts to accumulate. She allowed the image to harden into record. The surgeon passed by and paused. "No change yet," he said quietly. "Thank you," Evelyn replied. She returned to her phone. Another post had gone live. A caption about destiny, about timing, about choosing joy. Evelyn read it twice. Then she opened a new note and added a line beneath the others. Public celebration during medical crisis. This was not cruelty. It was documentation. She thought of all the cases she had closed over the years. The ones that failed were not undone by lies. They were undone by proof collected too early or too late. Timing mattered. She waited. The party grew louder, and with every post, every charge, every careless smile, the case grew stronger. Morning arrived without apology. Evelyn Carter was awake before it did. Hospitals trained people that way. She sat with a paper cup of coffee gone cold, eyes on her phone, waiting. She did not refresh feeds. She watched systems. The first signal did not come from Paris. It came from a notification, a declined charge. Then another. Evelyn did not move. She counted the seconds between alerts. 32, 47, a cluster. That told her enough. A freeze had started, not a glitch. Glitches recovered. Her phone rang. She let it ring twice before answering. Claire's voice cracked through the speaker, sharp and unsteady. Gone was the polish. Gone was the music. "My card isn't working," she said. "They say there's a problem with my account." Evelyn's gaze stayed on the corridor. Nurses passed. A cart rolled by. The beeping from the wing remained steady. "Which account?" Evelyn asked. "All of them," Claire snapped. "Hotel, transport, everything. I'm at the desk. They're asking questions." Evelyn said nothing. Claire kept talking. People always did when silence scared them. "They canceled my room. They said payments didn't clear, that my balance is under review." "What did you do?" Evelyn took a sip of cold coffee. "I documented facts," she said. "That doesn't make sense," Claire said. "You can't just, this is international. This affects contracts." "Yes," Evelyn replied. "It does." Claire's breathing grew loud. Evelyn could picture it clearly now. The lobby, the eyes, the sudden shift from admired to questioned. "They're saying my agreements are paused," Claire said. "Sponsors are calling. Someone flagged my accounts." Evelyn waited. "What do you want?" Claire asked. The question landed hollow. "I want consent recorded," Evelyn said, "and I want the truth preserved." Claire laughed once, thin and frantic. "You're doing this to punish me." "No," Evelyn said. "I'm letting consequences arrive on time." There was shouting in the background now, a staff voice. "Another request for identification." "Fix this," Claire said. "Please." Evelyn did not soften her tone. "You were unreachable when seconds mattered," she said. "Now systems are moving. They don't stop for apologies." Claire whispered something to someone nearby. The call muffled, then cleared. "Just tell them to lift it," Claire said. "I'll handle the rest." Evelyn looked toward the operating doors. A surgeon stepped out, spoke quietly to a nurse, then disappeared again. "Say yes to the care," Evelyn said. "On record." A long pause followed. Then, finally, a word. "Yes." Evelyn nodded once, as if the word had weight. "Stay on the line," she said. "I'm connecting the hospital." She ended the call before Claire could respond. Evelyn placed the phone on the table and exhaled. Not relief. Completion. Outside, the day continued. Inside, machines kept time. Paris had gone quiet. And for the first time, Claire was listening. The room was too quiet for comfort. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that forced every sound to stand out. The steady beep of the monitor, the soft hiss of oxygen, the faint creak of the floor when someone shifted their weight. Daniel lay motionless in the bed, his body held together by tubes, wires, and machines that worked without emotion. His chest rose and fell in a slow, mechanical rhythm. Evelyn Carter had watched numbers like these for most of her professional life. She knew how quickly they could change. She stood at the foot of the bed, hands folded loosely in front of her. Her coat was folded over the chair, her bag placed neatly beneath it. Everything about her posture said preparation, not shock. This room had been chosen carefully. There was space for witnesses, space for records to be read, space for the truth to land without distraction. The door opened. Claire Beaumont stepped inside and froze. The hospital room stripped her of every advantage she usually relied on. The lighting was harsh, the angles unforgiving. There was no music, no crowd, no screen to curate her expression. Her shoes made a soft, awkward sound against the floor, and she seemed suddenly unsure where to stand. Her eyes moved first to the machines, then to Daniel. She did not rush forward. She did not touch him. She stood still, as if approaching might require something she no longer had. Evelyn watched closely. The hesitation mattered. A second door opened behind Claire. Another presence entered the room. Neutral clothing, no visible badge, no announcement. Authority that did not need to introduce itself. The kind that arrived only after patterns had already been noticed. Evelyn acknowledged the presence with a brief nod. "Sit," she said. The word was calm, final. Claire hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair nearest the bed. It creaked softly. Her hands clasped together, separated, then clasped again. Her breathing was shallow now, uneven. Evelyn stepped to the side table and placed a thin folder down, not gently, not forcefully. Precisely aligned with the edge. "These are records," Evelyn said, "not accusations, not feelings." She opened the folder. The first pages were timelines: admission time, initial assessment, first request for consent, second, third. Each entry marked down to the minute. Evelyn read them aloud, her voice steady, almost instructional. The way she had spoken in conference rooms and review panels for decades. Claire shook her head. "You're making it sound intentional." Evelyn did not look up. "I'm making it sound accurate." She turned the page. Insurance structure, coverage amount, immediate payout clause, beneficiary designation, one name. Claire shifted in her chair. Her knee bounced once before she forced it still. "These policies reward speed," Evelyn continued, "not recovery." "That doesn't mean—" Claire started. Evelyn raised one finger, not sharply, just enough. "Let me finish." She moved on. Public activity logs, time-stamped posts, locations, financial transactions made while Daniel was unconscious, charges posted during treatment delays. Each entry aligned with the same direction. Claire's voice cracked. "I didn't want him to die." Evelyn closed the folder slowly. "Intent," she said, "is not proven by what you say. It's proven by what benefits you when you hesitate." The neutral presence stepped closer. A notebook opened. A pen moved. Clarifying questions followed. Evelyn answered each without pause. Claire's shoulders collapsed inward as the room seemed to shrink around her. The monitor continued to beep. The notebook closed. "We'll proceed," the neutral voice said. Claire looked at Evelyn, panic finally overtaking calculation. "Please." Evelyn gathered the folder. "Stand," she said. Claire stood. "Look at him," Evelyn added. Claire turned toward the bed. The machines continued their count. "This," Evelyn said quietly, "is what delay looks like." The door opened again. The record was complete. The collapse did not happen all at once. It unfolded the way systems always do, quietly, methodically, without anger or mercy. Claire Beaumont stood in a narrow hospital hallway with her phone pressed to her ear, her back against a pale wall that smelled faintly of disinfectant. The hallway was not meant for waiting. People passed through it quickly, eyes forward, focused on places that still mattered to them. For Claire, nothing mattered anymore except the voice on the other end of the line. "Please hold." The phrase repeated itself with slight variations: formal, polite, empty. She paced 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. Her shoes, once chosen for appearance, now made sharp, echoing sounds against the floor. Each step felt louder than the last. Her first call had been to the hotel. The manager's tone had shifted the moment her name was checked against the system. Apologies were offered. Explanations followed. A review was underway. Payment authorization had been suspended. The room, regrettably, could no longer be extended. Claire had laughed at first. Then she had realized no one was laughing with her. The next calls came quickly. Transportation services, payment processors, agencies. Every conversation followed the same pattern: concern, distance, delay. No one accused her of anything. No one needed to. Once systems stopped trusting you, words became irrelevant. By mid-morning, the emails began to arrive. Subject lines that used to sound exciting now read like warnings. Account status update. Pending review. Temporary suspension. Temporary was never temporary. Claire slid down into a chair near the wall and stared at her phone as notifications stacked one after another. She typed responses, deleted them, typed again. Nothing sounded right anymore. Nothing sounded convincing. Across the corridor, Evelyn Carter stood near a window, hands folded loosely at her waist. She did not approach. She did not observe openly. She simply remained present, the way one does when the outcome no longer needs guidance. This was not revenge. This was consequence. Claire tried calling again. A different number, a different contact. No answers. She opened her social accounts out of habit, then froze. Posts were gone, not hidden, removed. Mentions had vanished, comments disabled. Search results returned nothing recent. Her image, carefully built, endlessly curated, was being erased not by outrage, but by risk management. She looked around the hallway as if expecting someone to explain it to her. No one did. Late in the afternoon, 2 professionals arrived. Their demeanor was calm, efficient, practiced. Papers were presented, rights were explained, instructions were given in language stripped of emotion. Claire nodded too quickly, signed too fast. She asked one question: "Is this permanent?" The answer did not come directly. "It depends," she was told. That night, she was escorted out without ceremony, no raised voices, no spectacle, just a door opening, then closing. Evelyn did not follow. She returned to Daniel's room and sat down beside the bed. The chair pressed uncomfortably into her back. She welcomed the sensation. It reminded her that she was still in a body that could feel. The machines continued their steady work. Daniel's chest rose and fell. Still fragile, still alive. Evelyn rested one hand on the rail, careful not to disturb anything. Everything that could be taken from Claire had been taken. What remained was accountability. Evelyn looked at her son and spoke softly, not for him to hear, but because silence no longer needed to do the work. "You're still here," she said. That mattered. Outside the room, life moved on. Inside, time was no longer being negotiated. There was nothing left for Claire to hold. And for the first time since this began, Evelyn allowed herself to sit still. Evelyn Carter did not think of this as an ending. Endings were loud. They demanded emotion, witnesses, some visible release. What followed now was quieter than all of that. It was the absence that came after noise finally stopped pretending to matter. Daniel slept. Not the restless, sedated kind of sleep from earlier, but something closer to rest. The monitors still traced their careful lines, but the numbers no longer hovered on the edge. The room felt less tense, less sharp. Evelyn sat beside the bed, hands folded in her lap. She had not moved for a long time. Nurses passed without interrupting. The staff had learned to read her posture. She was not waiting for news anymore. She was keeping vigil. For most of her life, Evelyn had believed grief was supposed to be visible, loud, uncontained, something that proved love by the damage it caused to the person feeling it. She had learned otherwise. Grief could be quiet and still do its work. She looked at her son's face, pale but familiar. The face she had watched grow from helpless to stubborn to capable. The face that had trusted the wrong person, not out of weakness, but out of hope. Hope, Evelyn knew, was expensive. People paid for it in different ways. She thought about the sentence that had started everything. What if he doesn't make it anyway? The words had not been cruel because of what they implied. They had been cruel because of what they excluded. They excluded responsibility. They excluded urgency. They excluded love. Evelyn had not screamed when she heard them. She had not begged. She had not tried to win an argument that was never going to be fair. She had done what she had always done. She had followed the structure. People misunderstood that about her. They thought restraint meant coldness, that calculation meant the absence of feeling. They were wrong. Restraint was how she kept her hands steady when it mattered. Calculation was how she protected people who could not protect themselves. Evelyn had spent decades watching how harm moved through systems, how it disguised itself as accident, timing, misunderstanding, how money made hesitation look reasonable and delay look harmless. She had also learned something else. Systems remembered everything. They remembered timestamps, gaps, silences, choices made when no one thought they were being watched. All she had done was let those systems see clearly. She reached out and rested 2 fingers lightly on the bedrail. She did not touch her son's skin, not yet. She wanted the moment to remain intact. Outside the window, the city lights glowed without interest. Somewhere else in the world, Paris was waking up to another morning. The distance no longer mattered. Evelyn did not feel victorious. Victory suggested pleasure. What she felt was alignment. Things were now where they belonged. A life was still being fought for. A lie had lost its shelter. Consequences had arrived without needing to be chased. She leaned back slightly and closed her eyes for a moment. If someone asked her later why she hadn't cried, she already knew the answer. Because tears were not the point. Because this was never about punishment. Because stopping the celebration was enough. Evelyn opened her eyes and looked at her son once more. "You're still here," she said softly. That was the only outcome worth choosing. The machines continued their quiet work. Time moved forward, and the last sentence, the only one that mattered, had already been written, not in anger, not in revenge, but in record. Choice has consequences, that was all.